We wanted to talk about when you guys first decided to go. You had this code with Reverend Shuttlesworth.
Yes. When the Nashville group was preparing to take up the Freedom Ride and was going to go to Birmingham, that was my first encounter with Fred Shuttlesworth. I had heard of him because he was a legend in the civil rights movement. He was in Birmingham, had been for years, which was such a violent, segregated place. And he had been standing up for freedom for a very long time. He's such a courageous man. I called him on the telephone to let him know that the Nashville group was coming. And he prudently warned us. He said, you know about all the violence that happened, and it's really dangerous. And I assured him that we did understand that. And we wanted to come anyway. So then his attitude was, how can I help? And he wanted to, well, his plan was, I got to stop. That wasn't right. It wasn't how can I help. Once he was assured that we understood the danger involved and were going to come anyway, his response was that he was going to be supportive. And one of the things that he needed to know was the race and gender of each of the people coming, because he planned to have automobiles near the bus station so that he could pick people up and rescue them if necessary. So he couldn't arrange for example, some white girls and some black guys to be picked up in the same car, because that would have incited more violence. So he needed to know how many white girls and how many white guys and how many black girls and black guys were going to be coming. And he and I worked out a code. He told me, I wish I could remember the names of some of these kinds of chickens. Bantam or red something, I don't know. I'm sorry, I just can't remember the kinds of chickens, but a particular kind of chicken was a code for a white girl or a black girl, or for a white guy and a black guy. And so we knew that our telephones were tapped. And if I said I was sending so many of this particular kind of chicken, then he understood how many, the race and gender of the people coming.
Okay, great. Good. So we're back at the church. After you get out of the church, talk about that next few days where you have these meetings, and the riders had been, now your group of riders had been beaten in Montgomery. You have this kind of church siege, and so now you have another couple of days where you decided, we talked about what to do and whether to continue, right? So what happens the next couple of days?
Well, the Freedom Ride.
Just start over. I'm sorry. I was talking at the same time. It was my fault.
The original itinerary for the Freedom Ride called for the ride to leave Montgomery and to go to Jackson, Mississippi. And that's what the Freedom Riders did. So the ride left.
I'm sorry. I wanted to talk about what happens in the next couple of days. That you go to Dr. Harris's house, and there's talk, about how to continue. because I don't want it, I think that we don't want to say that you went from that church that.
Yes, we did have meetings where we laid strategy for what would happen next. And the original itinerary for the Freedom Ride called for the riders to go from Montgomery to Jackson, Mississippi. And it was decided that that's what the Freedom Ride would do. I think we already knew that that's what we were going to do, because the decision was to pick up the Freedom Ride and follow the original itinerary. So the Freedom Riders got on a bus and headed for Jackson, Mississippi. I drove from Jackson. I didn't drive myself, I was a passenger, with Lynn Holt, who was a black attorney. And he drove from Montgomery to Jackson, and I was the passenger in the car. And we could see that as we got closer to the bus station in Jackson, we could see that there was not going to be any violence because there were so many policemen for several blocks away from the bus station. And the riders were promptly arrested when they got to Jackson. Lynn Holt was an attorney.
I'm sorry, let's just cut. We've got a lot. I want to talk about after the church siege. You know, there are these series of meetings at Dr. Harris's house. Talk about the effort or the thought of persuading Martin Luther King to join the ride.
I don't have anything interesting to say about that. It just happened. Well, not that I'm going to say.
Please.
No.
We've got a bunch of other people talking about it, and
good.
And it's fine if you don't, you know, that whatever you think about it, or you know, but it is something that happened.
Yeah.
And
well, let them talk about it.
You don't want to talk about that. Okay. Okay. Do you know anything about the deal that was struck for the Freedom Riders to get out of Alabama?
No. Between who and who?
Alabama. Okay, let's cut for it. Rolling. There seemed to be a strategy in Mississippi to, you know, it seems like that Ross Barnett and Mississippi kind of had this strategy that, okay, we know what to do with the Freedom Riders, right? We'll just arrest them and put them in jail. What was the Freedom Riders' response to Ross Barnett?
They were in jail and I wasn't, so I'm not sure.
And the response was to kind of, let's cut for a minute. Okay. So talk about the response of the Freedom Riders to Ross Barnett's filling up the jails.
One of the strategies of nonviolent action is recruiting more and more people to witness and oppose an unjust law. And when the Freedom Riders were arrested in Jackson, one of the things that we needed to do was, and we, the organizations involved with the Freedom Ride, was to continue recruiting people. I did some recruiting in Jackson. It was kind of hard to recruit people in Jackson. There had not been I'm wary of saying there had not been any movement in Mississippi, but there certainly had not been much movement in Mississippi as compared to the sit-ins throughout the South in other states, Tennessee, Georgia, etc. There had been relatively little prior movement in Mississippi. And, but we did make the initial beginnings of college students at Tougaloo and at Jackson State and what have you. And there continued to be freedom riders coming from throughout the South that came to, throughout the country, that were arrested and came to Jackson. I don't remember seeing him flying in, but I knew he flew in for that meeting.
Well, let me just ask you first about the Nashville movement. So the first wave of the Freedom Rides is canceled. They fly out to New Orleans, and why was the group from Nashville ready and willing? Who were you, the Nashville students?
There were some unique things about the Nashville student movement. In 1960, we had carried out demonstrations and a nonviolent campaign to desegregate lunch counters and restaurants in Nashville. And we had successfully desegregated 6 of them. We were the first southern city to desegregate lunch counters during 1960 and became the pace setter city. Reverend Lawson, James Lawson, was in Nashville. He had been to India and had studied Gandhi's movement firsthand. And he had trained a cadre of students as well as older people in the community in the philosophy and strategy of nonviolence. The Nashville Central Committee consisted of representatives from about 5 different colleges and universities in the Nashville area. And we were a very committed group. We had an excellent education in the strategy and in the philosophy and strategy of nonviolence. And when the Freedom Ride occurred, we agreed with their objectives and stood ready to be supportive. We were capable and had had experience, the experience of successfully desegregating lunch counters the year before, and decided that we would support the Freedom Ride.
Okay.
Did that do it?
Huh?
Did that do it?
Yeah, that was great.
Okay.
I got just a couple more quick things. What do you think the Freedom Rides accomplished? What was the accomplishment of the Freedom Rides?
The Freedom Rides called on the moral consciousness of people throughout the country. It was the first time that we had put out a national call for people to come south and support and participate in the civil rights movement. I think that was certainly one of the important things. It moved the movement to a dimension of a national effort. There were national efforts to support the sit-ins in terms of people in local cities picketing and boycotting chain stores that were segregating lunch counters. But with the Freedom Rides, it's the first time that we put out a call nationally for people to actually come south and become part of the project.
I just want to get an idea of the result of that call. Do you know what I mean? Because you say you put out a call, but I think one of the accomplishments of the Freedom Rides was
they
what
came.
happened. Yeah, so if you could just tell me that, you know.
So one of the accomplishments of the Freedom Ride is that that was the first time we had put out a call nationwide for people to actually come to the South and participate in the civil rights movement. And they came. And there was a contingent of several hundred Freedom Riders eventually. And of course, the Freedom Ride was successful because interstate bus travel was desegregated.
Okay, let's cut. All right, let's get some. Okay, we're just gonna get a couple seconds of quiet.
Room tone.